What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Johnny Mack here. Just wanted to give you a heads up that if you are looking for a community that is open to discussion as far as mentorship, conservation, the wild, becoming a better person, and all of that, there is a group for you on Facebook, and it is called Soul Seekers. Soul Seekers, we are all about making ourselves a better person. We're all about making sure hunting lasts for generations to come and encouraging people to get plugged in. Whether you are someone who has something to give or someone who needs to soak it up like a sponge, this is a community for you, and I strongly encourage you that if you're on Facebook to join Soul Seekers, and if you're not on Facebook, hop on there just for that group. It is only going to be as powerful as we all make it. And so just remember that life happens for you, it doesn't happen to you, and that you can't outgive good. You can't outgive good, people. I want you to understand that, and I want you to believe it, because when we believe that and we lead with courage and we lead with intention, lives are changed, lives are transformed, just like on this podcast, transformation through primal adventure. Be blessed. Enjoy this episode. Talk soon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I have just a lovely, lovely episode for you. And it is with my great friend, Jess Caldwell from the Wild Kind Academy. And we're going to be talking all about her journey because she is in the middle of it right now. And she has developed this love and passion for the outdoors and to share it with the world. Jess, thank you so much for coming on and joining me for an episode.
Johnny Mack, thank you for having me on your podcast. I've really been enjoying listening to your episodes and just the depth that you provide your community, our community, with not just the hunting stuff, but the soulful stuff. It's been, when I got introduced to you, I was like, oh, this man speaks my language. So I really appreciate the connection. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And truly honored and humbled to have you on as a guest and to share this community right here with you. It's so fascinating. As I journeyed into the hunting realm, I realized that it was surrounded by this macho man mentality of tough guy and very guarded and shields up and don't let people see the heart and the soul and I was like, oh man, I need to create a community in which is more open and loving and welcoming and you know, I'm a hugger. I'll lead with a hug and be like, "Hey, nice to meet you." Bam,
Yeah, bam, bring it in.
Yeah, and so I feel like it is really fun and yet different to be talking the soulful side, the spiritual side, um, that has got you and I to where we are today. So,
Agreed.
give the listeners a little background on who you are, where you came from, and then let's dive into your story, your journey, because it's a beautiful one, and these
Thank you.
listeners, they're in for a treat.
Well, let's see. So where we started with, where did I start? I'm going to go way back. I'm going to go way back because I actually haven't really talked about this much, just even with my friends. But my first experience of really awakening to the outdoors and the power that outdoor connection has on our lives happened to me when I was 14. I went on a 3-week trek with Outward Bound. I was a kind of a troubled youth. I was in middle school at the time. It was a rough go for me. I was a very awkward teenager with very awkward middle school realities. And one summer, my parents, thank goodness for them, sent me off to 3 weeks on the Pacific Crest Trail, and it really was, I think, the thing that started my path off in an alignment that I really needed at that time. But it's really been kind of a stronghold for me throughout my life because it's led to some other things. But taking that start and spending 3 weeks with a small group of youth, being out there in the elements, being challenged to the point of the tears, the struggle, being away from home, being way out there, having to use an ice axe to stop a fall, from a mountain glacier, or at the very end, we did a 3-day solo where they leave you with just a tarp and some gorp, and you're left alone for 3 days. But to have that kind of start and that kind of coming of age, I think we don't, unfortunately, a lot of our youth don't get those coming of age opportunities anymore.
It's so fascinating. You're saying you did this in middle school, and by the way, Outward Bound program has always been something I've been naturally drawn to. I'm like, oh, I wanted to either participate in it or be a counselor for it, and
Yeah.
I never journeyed down that road, and that's okay. But you're 12 to 14 years old when you're doing this, and you're left alone in the wilderness with a tarp and some
And
gorp.
gorp.
For those the listeners who don't know what that is, that's what granola. Um,
It's good old, it's like good old peanuts and raisins or something like that. It's good old raisins and peanuts.
There you go. Yeah, it's like a trail mix type.
Yeah,
Okay. And,
yeah.
and so what did that open your eyes to? Like,
Oh gosh. So to me, that was the bridge where reality is kind of like matrix stuff, because when you're young, your worldview is so small and your reality is so small, and the trouble you're in with, friends and school is so limited. And then you take yourself out into, hiking 6, 7, miles a day with a 60-pound backpack on, and you are put into very uncomfortable situations. There's no toilet paper, there's no, I mean, it just removed all what thought was uncomfortable
yeah,
into real uncomfortable, the real stuff. And then to be put, to be alone for 3 days, I actually at that point welcomed it, because to be that surrounded by this intimate group, and every day doing this thing and having these adventures and struggles. And, we'd wake up on top of, cliff tops together, watching the stars and the sunrise, and very special. But to have that time alone when the instructors left you be, and you just had that time to really kind of absorb, because it's the last 3 days of the experience. And so to just get to, I guess, digest the experience in solitude and in quiet, I think was really my first introduction to maybe meditation or having kind of a enlightened experience before I knew what any of that was.
yeah.
Um, Observing nature, having my senses be that acute and that aware of every sound, of every, sight, smell, all of my senses just all vibrating so high. And I came back different. No, I wasn't the same when I came back. We walked into that airport just gross, and basically, all shared a hotel room and ate more pizza than I think is, probably humanly possible. Um, but when I returned back to school and back to my 15-year-old, 14, 15-year-old peers, I was a different person, 100%.
Yeah.
And my confidence was soaring at that time, because it was like nothing phased me. It was amazing.
I got to jump in here for a second because are you're talking about an experience when you were a young adolescent girl, and yet When I started my journey, and some of the things that I've encountered in my life, number one, I was afraid to be alone.
Mm,
And I was very unsettled in the wilderness, being alone. Number two is I know that when I put myself in those positions is when a lot of like either things would bubble to the surface and I'd have all these emotions or feelings or sensations. But there's something to be said when you're on a trail for hours on end with nothing to think about except your own thoughts and your own reality.
mhm.
It is extremely spiritual. I mean, I don't understand how anyone could go out into the wilderness and not connect with a higher power, the creator, or a lot of there's a lot of different spirituality and religions out there, but like ultimately like we are so small in the grand scheme of things and yet we are so powerful at the same time.
It's true. Yeah, very much so. And I really hear you. That speaks to me as well. I mean, nature is my place of worship for sure. I mean, it's where I go to renew and recharge and feel my most connected. And I've found that there's different studies out there about our time in nature and what power and impact it has on us. But I think in these last part of my adult life, I kind of missed out on when I entered the professional world and had two kids. I really missed out on some of those bigger, more, I guess, intense, really disconnected experiences out in the woods for multiple days at a time, or out in nature, and where I didn't have cell reception for multiple days. I lost a lot of that in my kind of in this range in my life, and now that I have teenage boys now, and they're great, they're doing their thing, and I have a little more freedom, and I've been blessed to be able to get away and get offline, and there's nothing like I know how it is to go out to just be outside your front door, barefoot in the grass. That has so much value. And then there's this next level thing that happens when maybe you go for a day hike. And then there's like this next level thing when you are so far away that there's no cell reception, and you go a couple of days and give yourself the grace of that recharge, because your cells feel it, your brain feels that the fog goes away, the energy comes back, and that power is and all things are possible. The weight of the world goes away.
100%. I
Hmm.
I agree with you beyond belief, and that's actually the creed of this podcast is transformation through primal adventure.
Hmm.
We transform our lives and ourselves and our mind, and we renew our spirit and our soul when we put ourselves in this primal, simple return to nature, return to the earth, return to the good old days of how things were without the distractions of the modern society. And that is where we get to
Yes.
explode in who we are. Creativity. I'm always like truly blown away. American ingenuity, but really just creativity. So many people live such a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a docile life. They have no creativity
Hmm.
because they just check in, check out, same routine, same dinner. This is what I do day to day to day to day to day. And it's so mundane. And I'm like, it's a sad existence. And if that's what you enjoy and love, then good for you. However, my soul craves more. And when I don't get that, I feel a little bit like I'm dying or withering inside. Is that stuff that
Yes.
you've
And this is such
experienced?
a human. Well, yes, and I think it's a bit of an interesting human experiment we're a part of right now, because this has never been this way. I mean, we've evolved as humans, in intimate relationship with the natural world, and it's only in this recent modern, our modern lifestyle is not set up. for the animals that we are. I mean, we're caged. We live in four walls and under fluorescent lights and on a constant radio frequency and many other higher frequencies going on at all times. With that's affecting our brain waves. We've got temperature control, everything going on that has affected us. And sometimes I've had those moments of just kind of feeling like a lab rat, where I'm like this, where I don't feel good. I physically don't feel good just doing the thing, that, that we're all here doing, unless I find ways to, I guess, return to my natural habitat. Because that's, this is new. This is a unique time to be alive for sure. And I love being alive in this time. It's actually not a complaint. I actually think it's one of the most exciting times to be alive ever. I mean, here we are talking in this Zoom call, and technology is actually rad. And it's all, this is a great time to be alive. So I love it. It's like finding my relationship with it and my balance with it. And I have a lot of fun exploring this.
Yeah. I like to, it's an and life. Technology rocks and nature's amazing. It's not like one
Mhm.
or the other. It's and life. It's technology that brought you and I together for this conversation. It's technology that allows us to reach outside our own small little neighborhoods and communities to connect with people all over this globe and to build relationships and get in tune with each other. And yet, if we allow it to control our lives, it's a vice that takes us down very quickly. And
Yeah.
it's sad. Well, let's shift gears here for a little bit because you talked about your childhood and Outward Bound and this experience that you had. What is this journey that has led you to rewild yourself and to really identify you wanting to return to the root of humanity?
Well, I love the word rewilding because it just, my personal tagline is rewilding is the new self-care, because that really speaks to me. I mean, I love a good pedicure, don't get me wrong, but that does not fill me, the way rewilding my life has. That is self-care. Because for me, I guess the strong version of this journey started around COVID time because I lost my job. I was a marketing and sales director for our performing arts center here locally in Washington State, at our state capitol. So we had a beautiful theater. I loved my life. We had wonderful shows and artists coming through town. I got to go to the best, see the best in entertainment, meet amazing artists. But once, I also worked a lot and didn't have a whole lot of time to get out and explore my world. I just had my weekends off and was kind of a weekend warrior on different things. But once that we found ourselves kind of at home and not having the normal lifestyle, I started. Whew, I got introduced to fishing. I got introduced to hunting, and all of this happened in this like same window. I had never I wasn't raised in a family that raised me with fishing or hunting or outdoor activity, other than maybe a camping trip, this or that. But this was some next level stuff for me, and so I went fishing for the first time a year and a half ago. It was ice fishing out in Idaho at Cascade Lake for perch. I had the best time, and then it was like another fishing trip, and then it was another fishing trip, and fishing became something to me that was just outrageous because it's like again, to me, you take me out in the middle of nowhere. Your mind is still on and you're focused on something, but you're not thinking. The repetitive thoughts are gone. The sense of the to-do list or what's next just isn't there. You're present. And then when you feel that tug on your line, I mean, it's like the coolest thing. My heart just explodes and I'm jumping up and down and the excitement is palatable. And it just made me feel things and feel alive in a way I hadn't in a long time. And I do have to thank Scott Turner with Silhouette Outdoors for that. He has a YouTube channel and was really someone who, this is his life, hunting, fishing. And he just brought me into his world. And I'm just so thankful for that experience. And I went on I went on my first, well, I'll kind of mention that later. I want to talk about hunting and almost like this next thing. But so for rewilding anyway, once was introduced to fishing, then it was like, some backcountry backpacking happened and more fishing and more opportunities to get way out. And the more I did that, the more it just lifted my life force. My fears, I just wasn't even as very, I guess I wasn't very involved with, oh gosh, I went offline pretty much for a year. I mean, my friends and family can tell you, I just took the grace of this year to go out and be offline as much as possible. And with me, I've always had a background in health, wellness, nutrition. I went to school at Portland State University and graduated with a degree in health and fitness promotion. I've always been an athlete and into sports and physical activities. I took a nutrition coaching school course and I've been on this path of holistic health for as long as I can remember. I did a 500-hour yoga meditation teacher training. And I've always done something to engage my mind and body in good health and to share that with others. So rewilding to me is more than just getting outside or having an engagement. It is very much a holistic practice of thriving. And that is, I know you love that word. I've heard you, I know thriving is your thing too. And it just, I think that's why we're like, we could just talk all night, but thriving, I do believe we are all here with a unique path to thrive. And I do believe we have to take care of ourselves in order to access that in unique ways. They're always going to be unique to us and the individual. But if we can set ourselves up with as much, fresh sunlight, exposure to the elements, some hardiness training, resilience training, good nourishment for our bodies, movement, I think we're all, it's just the recipe to live well
Yes.
and be in this life, in this modern world, thriving.
Absolutely. And yes, I do use that word a lot because and over this last year with the whole coronavirus and conspiracy theories and all the different things that it's like the end of the world and Armageddon and apocalyptic and all this stuff is happening. I've realized, and specifically, I've realized like being a public education school teacher, public education does not teach you the things that you should, and I do use the word should, effectively know in society to make yourself a better person and to identify how to make a life of thriving for yourself and for your family. With that being
Yes.
said, it doesn't teach you about taxes, it doesn't teach you about why things are the way they are. But I think it's very interesting that you're talking about thriving and you're also what earlier you mentioned tuning in. And I really feel like there's this harmonious crossing in which people don't give themselves the permission to be still and be alone and be silent and to see what is actually coming to them and what they're meant for. And a part of my journey was actually finally listening to that call upon my soul, the call of the wild.
Hmm.
For it's like, oh, this is where I can excel at. And this is what I love. And this is what brings me joy and happiness. And it doesn't just do it for me, it's something that I get to bring home and share with my friends and family. And I can cook them a meal and like this greater spider web that just radiated out when I found hunting. For me
Hmm.
specifically, I
Yeah.
was raised a fisherman. I love fishing, but the act of I think it's a sweat equity and also the return on investment that I truly love. But talking about the tuning in, because this is a little the woo woo that people get super uncomfortable with. we sit in front of TVs, we tune into a TV station, we tune into a radio station, we can tune into the vibrations of the world and we can receive them or say, no, not for me. I don't want anything to do with that. How much of this was you tuning into your journey, your path, versus kind of ignoring it and living a life of maybe fear driven or anxiety driven or anything like that?
Well, I've done it all. I've done all the, I mean, the cool thing about being a human with with hormones, emotions, chemicals, electric signals going through our body, and emotional charges, we get to experience it all. So I've been deeply depressed. I've had anxiety. I've moved all the things I get to be human and have experienced. And there's, I think, the wisdom of age. When you start to have your lifetime and you start to have experiences, you get that personal wisdom of what works and and I think we're all given some basic tools on how to heal ourselves, and what works. And it does, I think, require some self-reflection and time to hear and listen and feel. I do know that something you mentioned here about signals or tuning in. Our brains are receivers, and we are so constantly allowing the signals to come in to our massive receivers that is not our own. It's everything from, if you're on a phone at from 5 to 6, however many hours a day that you're checking in, or other channels of information based data that's coming at us, or even just around people all the time, or at work, or these data channels coming in are a total drain. I mean, they're more than our brains, I think. you know well, our brains can handle it because our brains are incredible devices. But, whether we're thriving in without having some time to turn those channels off so that we can hear the more subtle cues coming our way, whether that's, from the sourcing within, from the soul, from the spirit, from the universe. I do believe the information is there for us to receive, but it is a powerful discipline to get quiet enough to hear it.
Right, because the radio waves for your favorite radio station don't stop. It's just a
Mm-mm.
matter of whether or not you tune in and turn it on and allow yourself to receive it. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with the Schumann resonance?
Mm-mm.
It's the Schumann resonance is like a set of frequencies that the earth has naturally. And
Hmm.
then the earth naturally has a frequency and it can raise and lower depending on like, and I don't know all this, so I have it pulled up in front of me, but a lot of it talks about like the good and the bad and the polarities of the
Mhm.
energies and how this earth has its natural harmonious state of being. And when things disrupt it, it affects that resonance and then it can affect the way humans are, whether
Yeah.
it's like they're sleepy, groggy, sad, depressed,
Mhm.
energetic. It's just very fascinating. I just learned of this year throughout the COVID stuff as well, and
Well, we're picking up on a collective. I mean, and there is a collective surge of energy, even especially this last year. Whether you're talking a pandemic or politics or social issues, we are all feeling a lot right now. All of us are feeling a lot, and whether you're sensitive or not, you're gonna get the intensity of this kind of what's happening all around us. Whether you're hearing it just from friends talking, or from your channels that you're tuned into, or just because of a more energetic, the energetics of what's going on. So I think this is a most powerful time to rewild our lives, and that is, to me, that's my mission. I I do a lot out there, and it's everything from, I have a weekly blog that I do, a rewilding post that I every Sunday that I share. And I've chosen in 2021 to do one thing every week to rewild my life and that is, and then I share that. And that could be something that, is, it might be a fishing experience. It might be something that happens out in the backcountry. But it's also been things like learning a new plant every week. I take an ethnobotany apprenticeship through Earth Walk Northwest. And every week we learn a new plant, and I get out there and I'm foraging, and I'm always taking on something. And then I bring that home and I do something with it. I turn it into a meal. I add it as a side dish, or so this is part of my rewilding, is just remembering, maybe that's a word that I don't need to use, but a reminding myself that there is so much abundance all around us. And when I interact with that abundance, things like fear, panic, worry, anxiety, they start to work themselves out. Because yes, we all experienced a little bit of that, ooh, like the world is changing. We can all feel it. There's maybe something coming. It could be, there's that sense of lurking change, that what we're currently in is not sustainable. I
Yep.
think many of us feel that.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is going to bring with that some anxiety and a sense of placement in the world. Like, am I ready for this? Am I even prepared for what could happen if we had a grid surge, if we had a major catastrophe, environmental disaster, if we just had a food shortage, if something went wrong with the food supply, so or a superbug,
Yeah.
and we could go on, but I think if I allow myself, and I have, that's a whole nother lifetime of mine, was my 10 years of being a prepper, which is probably a totally different channel. But
Yeah,
I,
just real quick,
yeah,
Jess used to be a full-time prepper. This is what she used to prepare for the apocalypse.
heck yeah. I was the Reba McEntire from Tremors.
Yes.
And that I spent 10 years. My husband at the time, he built underground shelters for a living. And he was a bunker builder and built these, we're talking 2-3 bedroom homes under the earth. And I was a consultant for emergency supplies and emergency food and freeze dried food. So together we were quite a team. Basically, people would sit with us and we would say, okay, what's your worst case scenario? And it's all over the board. Everyone has a different worst case scenario, but then we would support them for their preparations. And whether some people need submarine doors on their shelters, and some people need ammo. It's all over the place, and some people just need a lot of food and water. So I lived that for 10 years. I did it myself. I got exceptionally neurotic about it when I had my 2 kids, because all of a sudden it was like, anything, mama bear kicked in, and I just wanted to make sure they were, accounted for. They were going to be safe in a changing world. And I don't know. I hit it. I hit an edge that was not healthy. And I can recall the moment where I knew I needed a lifestyle change and completely redesign my life. And I was actually driving with my 2 kids to Portland, and my folks lived there I was coming from Washington to Oregon, and I was counting the rivers, because that's how many rivers I would not be able, once I hit the big one, it was like, there's no way I can cross this with my kids and get back to my safe zone. Once you have a shelter and food supplies and everything you could possibly need to survive an apocalypse, it's really hard to leave. You feel a sense of insecurity, a sense that I might, what if the thing happens now? What if a big earthquake happens? And in the middle of the night, staying with my family and my 2 young kids, I woke up with so much anxiety. My heart was racing. I didn't feel safe. And I packed them up at 2 a.m. and we drove home. And I think that moment for me was like, wow, I'm not even living. I can't even leave the farm, and I think at that point realized a big change was needed. And so, that kind of started a whole thing of freedom for me,
You
actually.
you had a leash on yourself.
Yeah.
You put yourself on a leash for your life, and it's like, I need this to feel safe. I need this to feel control. It is truly fascinating. I took my brother spring turkey hunting for the very first time this year, and he was sitting there and he's like, "Man, it is just so amazing that these animals, they just naturally know how to find food. They don't think,
Mm.
is this edible? I'm going to try it. Or is this edible? Or is this going to kill me? They just know." And it's so fascinating that modern day society has removed itself so much from the earth and the natural world that we don't actually even know that pharmaceuticals originally stemmed from, Eastern quote unquote medicine or natural remedies, and yet people just totally they forget that. I just
Well,
recently
I looked at, I mean, the money that was spent on food storage, on, all of these things, and then it had this weight to it. The more you have, the more you have, the more weight you carry. And I actually feel like at this time of my life, one of the freedoms I'm experiencing is there's a lightness happening into me where it's like I'm prepared to get rid of everything. I mean, I am simplifying left and right to whittling down, where if I actually want my sense of security in the world really to come from my relationship to the world around, to the natural environment, because humans were doing this thing. Yes, they had it rough, but they had the skill sets to make clothing, make medicine, eat food, and they did this, brilliantly. And we've really lost a lot of those skills. And I think the more that I educate myself, the more I feel strong in my presence here, as a human on earth, where I don't need to, yes, as I think it's probably wise to have a little bit of, some food storage, some things just to be to not put your head in the sand, that just you can go to the grocery store at any moment. Those things are permeable. They but what can't be taken away from you is the skill set of knowing what's growing around you,
mm,
the food that's right there. I mean, the weeds in my backyard are absolutely treasures to me. I went out and
right.
I went out recently in or early spring, and I got all my nettles and was making nettle pesto and nettle, drying the nettle for later tea, making, eggs and nettle. I mean, nettle was the thing on the menu. And then you've got your dandelions coming up, which you can just go around, start eating the little leaves, creating salads with the greens around you growing up that people would refer to as weeds, and try to eradicate. And then, I was popping those beautiful little dandelion heads and making fritters, for my kids, at fritter pancake, little fritters with the pancake batter from dandelions. And there's just so much abundance here. And so the more I learn a new plant, and now I'm about to start this journey and path of the hunter. So we could maybe segue, but that's next level.
I do want to just add a little bit to this before we get into the hunting thing.
Sure.
I have always been, well, no, let me take a step back. I never looked outside of myself in a greater scale until I became a hunter. And specifically, it's like talking about what is edible, what is not, what do we need, what do we not need, what is the earth going to provide for us. And there's always been this thing. My brother, he's an older brother than me. I look up to him. He's very wise, very intelligent. And he always was like, "Yeah, let me know when the book burning begins so I'll know what ones to buy." And and I think this is like one of the biggest like aha moments I've had over the last year and a half is that people do not hold their own knowledge anymore. It's always, "Oh, Google this," or "What does Siri say?" Or they go to these other electronic resources. And based off of how mainstream media is, you don't get the same results on Google that you do on DuckDuckGo. Whether you're looking up politics, religion, all sorts of different things. And so it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, who is actually holding the knowledge? I want to hold my own knowledge. I want to
Hmm.
be able to take care of myself, my wife, my children, and I want them to have the skill set to go out into this world and live an abundant life and
Hmm.
thrive. And so I actually just recently bought 3 books because I'm like, okay, I need to actually start having books when the power goes out. I want to I want to be able to read and hold knowledge. So I got Edible Wild Plants I just picked up. Um,
Okay. Okay, look, we're gonna do it. We're doing a book exchange here. All right. All right. So let's see what you got.
okay, I got the Practical Herbal Medicine Handbook,
Yes.
and then I got Edible Wild Plants for Beginners.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's great. A really great one for us is Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast for Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, and Alaska. That's a brilliant one. The Forager's Harvest is, is definitely a Bible. That's one to have. Botany in a Day, another good one. Here's an old school one: Participating in Nature, Thomas Apple's Field Guide to Primitive Living Skills. This one's old school, but
Sweet.
I love books. I have a library at my house of books. It is, I love books and I love, but yeah, I'm with
It's
you.
so fascinating because it's like we want to lighten the load, and I actually have gotten to this point where it's like, okay, I almost want to live in a tiny house,
Yes.
not because I actually want to live in such a small confined space with 3 children. Um, it's because I want to let go.
Hmm.
I want freedom in my life more than anything else. I want
I,
freedom. I want liberty. I want justice. I want to stand sovereign. I want to be me regardless of what everything else is going on in this world.
yeah, I really, that speaks to me big time. So it goes right to the heart. I think we all crave freedom. I mean, I feel like that's a universal truth that most people could say, I want to feel free. I want my life to be my own. I want to feel, alive. But this thing about freedom is a big deal. And, whether what takes you out of freedom is fear, or whether it's debt, or whether it's a job, or whether it's a mindset or a relationship, or all the things that we think takes us, or maybe it's whatever it is, we could really start to identify. I'm really into lifestyle design because one of the things I feel that I have had to work at is designing a life. Like, you don't just, life isn't happening to me. It's like I got to design it. And in order to design it, I listened to your podcast that I think just came out today about goals and manifestation, which is great stuff. But I think it's really important to, what is freedom? What is personal freedom to you? Because it might be a little bit different.
Yes.
And then it's like, for me, I can sense and feel what I'm drawn to for personal freedom, and then I actually have to write that down, and then I have to start the process of lifestyle design. It's like, well, what's taking me from that? And then making bold moves. Sometimes they're really bold moves to to make sure that this one life you got in this amazing spacesuit that we're walking around in has its opportunity to do the thing it's here to do.
Totally, Jess, you're speaking my language. I
I know.
I
I
just
was like, man, you speak my
okay,
language.
first off, first off, I had a conversation with a coworker the other day, and I was like, what does freedom mean to you? Because, like you said, freedom needs to be defined by an individual. Because what I view as freedom does not mean what you view as freedom. And his response to me was, freedom to me is the ability to be wrong and it being okay. And
Hmm.
I was like, okay, you answered that.
Yeah.
That
You have an
mean I go, but that means someone else is right.
mm,
And he looked at me and I was like, so you're saying you just want to be okay that you're wrong, but that doesn't actually mean that you're right. I was like, there can be two rights,
mhm,
but you're not stating that. And I
mhm,
was like, come on, what does freedom actually mean to you? I recently, my wife and we've been blessed. I believe that I overpaid for my house 2 years ago. My wife was pregnant with a third. We were due like any week. We needed a home. And so we bought this house, and I was like, dude, we're overpaying, and there's no way we're gonna make money in this market.
Mhm.
And our house skyrocketed. And like, I'm a school teacher, and I don't even want to say how much my house is worth because I can't believe it's all fake. It's all monopoly money.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what's not monopoly money is if we refinance, pull out cash, buy land for cash, and have
Yeah,
a place that is ours regardless of anything, even if the
yeah,
market crashes, it's paid for.
correct.
And I was like, that is freedom. The freedom to be
Yes.
like, I own
Tangible.
this and no one else can say, do, or be anything to me. This is mine.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Yeah, yeah, freedom, absolutely. And thank you for stating your freedom.
I,
Thanks for sharing your freedom.
thank you. It feels very freeing to share my freedoms. Well, let's.
Right? I have a quick story. Oh gosh, you can reel me in, but this kind of goes back to coming out of Outward Bound. Like I'm kind of going back full circle, but it has to do with freedom too. And I think what these experiences, when we give ourselves experiences like time alone, time even in the even sometimes on a little bit uncomfortable extreme, things that challenge us, that make us kind of have these moments where we're on that edge of like, am I safe? Am I good? Like really putting yourself in, and I think this is why, we could talk about where hunting and outdoor adventure can really bring these opportunities to us. But when I came back from Outward Bound, I'm now 15 years old. It was the next summer. I had my first job bussing tables at a restaurant at the Sisters Saloon in Sisters, Oregon, at the Hotel Sisters Saloon. And I took my first paycheck and I bought myself my first backpack. And because I'd had that experience the year before. I'm now, I must have been now 16 because I'm driving and I'm working. So my dad traveled a lot and he was out of town and I was often home alone. And I took my backpack and I really was missing, craving that alone, that sense of being on the edge, being somewhere by myself, me and nature. And so this was before cell phones. And I drove up to Black Butte, which is in Sisters, Oregon. And I drove over there at just before dusk. It must have been about 4 in the afternoon or so. And I had my backpack, I had a sleeping bag, I had a flashlight, a water bottle. I didn't have any weapons of any kind. I was just like 16 years old and just like, I'm going to go backpack tonight and stay up at the top of Black Butte. And so I'm by myself. Nobody knows where I am. I hadn't checked in with a family or friend to say anything. I just felt the freedom. This was this pull of freedom that I could do it and that it doesn't, I didn't feel afraid. And so I started my trek up to the top of Black Butte at around 4:30, 5 o'clock. I probably got up there around 7 or so. The sun's going down over the Three Sisters Mountains, and I'm so excited. I can feel this surging in me of the energy that I'm after, that I'm currently after. There's a feeling you get when you are alone with the elements, when you're like on your own, observing something, participating in it, experiencing it, mind, body, spirit. And I'm up there with nobody. And I get my sleeping bag out and I tuck myself in and I just was so stoked to watch the sunset, just like so thrilled. Well, the sun just starts to go down where it's just now like dusk. The sun is down. And I start to hear this creepy like music, like we're talking like violin playing that's across the hillside. And I'm like, uh-oh, where's that coming from? And who could be up here? I mean, there's no, you're supposed to be out of there by dusk.
Right.
And I started walking myself, like, uh-oh, I walked myself over to this hillside and I'm looking down and I see this old abandoned shelter that was probably an old fire station, a ranger station, but it was boarded up, and I was like, oh no, there's a ghost up here. Like I thought it might be coming from that, and I had a moment's panic. But as I walked further over the hillside, there was a new revived lookout where there was like the ranger was there, and his music was blasting, and he was, listening to violin, drinking his evening tea, and he sees me, and he's just like, what are you doing up here? He just couldn't even believe it, and I was like, oh, I just came up to watch the sunset. I'll just be sleeping over there, and don't mind me. And he was like, thought it was just nuts, and he brought me up for a hot chocolate, and it was just ended up being this really cool experience, where he's like, oh, well, are you sure you're okay? If you need anything, just yell, and he's like, there's animals up here. And I was like, yeah, I'm good, just, but those recreating that for myself, like that feeling is, I think, what I'm trying to do in my adult life right now. That's freedom to me. When you can just put on a pack, take what's on your back, and get somewhere and be alone, or just have these experiences that you are participating directly with something magical. To me, those sunsets are magic.
Yeah.
Sunrise, magic. Stars at night, watching a critter, totally magic. And when I have those experiences, my whole body surges. It is to me spiritual.
Yeah. I for me have found like an extra parallel of hunting to running,
Mm,
especially trail running. But this concept, I signed up for a 100-mile ultra marathon last year. The
whoa.
end of March, I was going to participate and do my very first. I ran one marathon, like actual race in my life, and I did that because I was like, I need to see what this is like. And then I want to do 100 because what I've realized is people don't actually know what hard is. We put our mental box on and live our life within that, and it's like, well, what is actually hard? What is actually difficult? Or is it just your mind making up these hurdles or these boundaries for yourself? It's like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, no, I'll never be able to achieve that. Well, if the American dream and that life is anything that you want to make it, the Bible talks about moving mountains and like creating this life. Like really remove the barriers and just go get after life with as much vim and vigor as you can because I love the quote where it's like either you get busy living or you get busy dying.
Hmm.
And I'm here to live and thrive. So
Yeah. Have you heard of this book? Has been my new exciting one, The Comfort Crisis.
I have heard of it because Donnie Vincent was on my podcast back
Yeah.
in January, and I know that he took the author of that book out into the wild to hunt for the very first time. And
Yeah. Yeah. Alaska Tundra. It is so good. It covers so many things we've talked about, but I love reading, and this is my top choice summer pick right now.
wow, that's awesome. I personally have gotten into. I just finished Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Okay.
He is a philosopher, psychologist out of World War II, a Jew who got
Mm,
put into Auschwitz internment camp, and he ended up writing all this stuff, being like, you know, he quotes Nietzsche a lot with the whole, you know, a man who has a why can get through any how.
mm,
But this concept of like we don't know what we don't know, so go out there and figure it out
mhm,
and experience it. And like you said, experiential things is what just opens our eyes and be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't
mhm.
so hard. I,
Right.
I can do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this hunting journey that you're on. So you went fishing this last year. You caught perch. You went and enjoyed this process, and now the next step of being able to provide food for yourself, and ultimately the last step, because foraging, fishing, and then hunting, the actual taking the life of a breathing animal that you're sharing on this earth with. What's your journey? What's the real meaning behind it, and have you experienced it yet?
So I've always valued healthy food, nutrition. What it goes into my body is an important part of living well and feeling good. So I was kind of one of those, organic snobs. I mean, I don't mean to be a snob. I just really care about the quality of food and where it comes from. And I also, to me, meat. I eat grass fed meat. I like to know where the meat's coming from. I like to know that chickens are free range and that they're out there having a good life. I mean, those things have always been important to me. Um, for as long as I can remember, I've cared about good quality food. But this path of hunting. So the first time, and I'm doing a weekly blog on hunting as well. Like I write something every Tuesday about the journey and put it out on Instagram, because I do want to bring some of my community along this path. I think a lot of my friends know me as a yoga instructor and, just different, different things. And there is this difference between, one thing I follow a lot of people on Instagram and I see they'll go on a hunt and have a picture with a dead animal and, with their bow and they're holding this animal. And for some people that is so offensive. And that, and yet in the hunting community, there is a storyline behind that picture and behind the reason for sharing that. And I have really been diving into all of it so that, to understand. But I've wanted to bring my community along with me because most of my community has not been very much doesn't have a hunting background or is not used to this. So it's kind of a slow build into like education and also sharing the journey so that we can all learn together what this is about and what the value is, the conservation side. There's so much to learn. And the more I dive in, the more I'm just like, oh, I feel sad that I did not, wasn't raised with this information and that I didn't have these opportunities growing up, because it's a really amazing education to learn about our relationship with animals. I am a meat eater. So I've always been a meat eater. And I think when I went on my first hunt, it was actually just to hunt for blue grouse. It wasn't my hunt. I just went along and it was for bird, and it was the first time it was 14 miles, a camping trip, and just bringing back the birds to camp to field dress. So that was kind of my first experience with hands-on. All right, you take an animal's life, you bring it back to camp, your hands in, and now you've got food. And that was this first kind of bridge crossing moment of like, wow, there's wild game out there and you can actually bring home your own meal that is, it was a totally different relationship because it was hard work. I felt like the effort, all of a sudden I became worthy of that meal. Like it gave me an entirely different appreciation for the food in a way I had never experienced before. I liked that my hand could go on that animal and I could say thank you. I liked that there was sweat and effort and equity in the entire experience. And then when I ate it, I could say, I slowed down when I ate. It was a different eating experience. It was like tasting to say thank you and the nourishment coming in, and it was through the effort of our hands. So that shifted something for me. And on this last post I did, I gave an example that I think on our human sensitivity scale, from a scale of bullfrog to Bambi, like we all have our sensitivity scales. For fishing, I no problem. I'd go fishing, I'd gut the fish, I'd eat the fish. Then you go grouse hunting and there's feathers now. And it's like, okay, there's feathers. It has a little more sensitivity scale for me but it's still doable. And then the next experience I had is I went on an antelope hunt. It wasn't my hunt, but I was there in the blind for 2 days and witnessed the whole thing. And it was an archery hunt, and then the field dressing and the packaging of the meat. It was the whole process. And that to me really was the game changer, where I was like, it was a big deal. I felt all the feelings of the experience. It was so visceral. It was so, it was really incredible. But I also experienced the freezer getting, packaged meat going into the freezer, and that was done by hand, by our hands, and it just felt like something I'd never experienced before. And I knew that that was my next step of moving into the next phase of rewilding, which is getting this connection back to harvesting food in
That
this way.
that is so awesome. What is your big journey that you plan on going on this fall? Like, is it your hunt this year?
Yeah, yeah. So I did my hunter's ed course, and that took way longer than I thought because it's like a whole new language for me. I mean, I learning about uh, rifles and literally it was like picking up a new language, and so it took a long time for me to get through my hunter's ed course, but I did, and then I picked up I bought a bow. I do plan on being a bow hunter, and so I went with Bow Tech, got my signature series, bow. And one thing I did is I reached out to a trainer because this is when I hunt, I want to know that I'm doing this consciously and in a most humane way possible and it's got to be done right, basically, as you know. So I didn't want to mess around with taking myself out with a bow and saying good luck. um,
Yeah.
so I got a trainer, and I'm working with Joel Turner with Shot IQ. He's here in Washington State. He's brilliant. I don't know if you've heard of his program, but he really gets into the mind stuff of developing the mental pathway, the mind pathway. He really speaks my language as well, our language. I love this. I love what I'm learning from him, and he's been a real mentor for me. I'm really thankful for him. And so I'm training right now. I'm training with my bow. I'm starting a regiment. This like you've trained for a marathon. I'm training for hunting season. So for me, that means I'm getting a pack. I'm going to start putting weight in it. I'm going to start getting my body in shape. I'm going to be practicing on my bow. I'm going to be learning about the animals. I actually heard a recommendation from a podcast that Donnie Vincent was on. Oh, this book. Here we go. The Big Game Animals of North America, Jack O'Connor.
Oh yeah.
So I just got this one because of a podcast that I heard, because I'm trying to absorb as much information as possible. And I realized there's a lot to learn about the animals. So this
Yes.
is a full on education that feels like literally I'm taking on going back to university. I mean, it feels so big, and there's so much to learn.
And you know what's amazing is that when you get your first kill, you're gonna be like, it was all worth it. All
Mhm.
worth it. And that is where people are like against grip and grins and this concept like, why are you taking a picture with the dead animal? It's like because you don't know how much effort and work went into actually getting this animal and what it's gonna do.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm reading a lot about the different perspectives of all of these things. For me, I this is going to be an honor to enter this world, and the people I have met, and the heart that is involved, the conservation as that is the result of hunters, the dollars going back into into wild places and to the animals. It's actually one of the coolest stories of my adult life. I mean, I am enamored with hunters. I am enamored with the journey. I am enamored with the animals, and our relationships. I mean, this has probably been one of the, I think I said at one point, other than having children and birthing children into the world, this is as epic to me and as big of a deal as those years birthing a baby and bringing life into the world. It's as big a deal to me.
That's quite a statement. That is
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Um, I agree 100%. I don't have the experience of what it's like to actually birth a child, but I was there for the birth of my three children, and I went hand in hand with my wife, and I saw and experienced what that was like. I totally agree. And that book, North American Game Wildlife by Jack
Big
O'Connor.
game animals of North America.
Yep. Jack O'Connor, a lot of people don't realize how impressive and what he did. If you ever make your way over to Lewiston, Idaho, there
Okay.
is at Hell's Gate State Park the Jack O'Connor Center, and it's free to the
Oh,
public. And you can go in there. It has some of his weapons, has a lot of his taxidermy, and it is a museum pretty much to Jack O'Connor. I highly recommend checking that out.
wonderful. I sure will because I go to Idaho a lot. In fact, my in September I'll be going for I have a tag for antelope.
All right.
So I'll be doing that, and then I got tags here. I went in for tags for here in Washington for deer and elk as well.
That's awesome. I got to share just a little story with you because maybe this is a part of the fun connection in which we have. You're talking about your community mostly knows you as a yoga instructor. My very first big game kill was 9 miles into the backcountry of the state of Washington, and I shot a bear, a black bear, in front of a yoga instructor from Seattle and her two male students. Not
Oh,
not like directly in front. We were in for a couple days, and all of a sudden I hear a dog barking. "Brr, brr, brr." I'm like, oh man, we're hunting. I didn't expect anyone to be here, and some day hikers showed up, and it was a female yoga instructor and her two male students and their dog. And I'm like, oh great. And then this interaction, like, what are you doing here? Why are you dressed in camo? What? You can hunt bears? I didn't know you could hunt bears, and yada yada yada, to the point where the yoga instructor was the one who actually spotted the bear. And she
wow.
goes, "There's a bear right there."
Oh,
And
wow.
got to chase it down. I have a little granola in me. I used to work at REI and I wear Birkenstocks, and I actually put on my Birkenstocks and chased down this black bear and shot it, and it was quite the experience. But I the guys were more like standoffish, like, "Oh, I don't know about this." But the yoga instructor, she was all about it. She was like, "Thank you so much for keeping us safe. Thank you. Can I look at it? Can I would love to meet her again and actually
Right?
have a
That must have been
conversation with her."
a radical experience for her just out hiking. I mean, what a yeah, what an interesting thing to come across. I one thing I'm interested in, I know you have mentorship. You speak about mentorship, and one of my I don't even know if it's a challenge yet. I just know that being an adult woman who's entering this world on her own. I think one of my greatest challenges is mentorship. Where to go, how to get on certain land. There's a lot I can read in books, but there's not a lot available. I mean, there's no real um, it's a unique challenge for me because I don't know any women hunters, and in fact, just any of your listeners, as I'm putting this out there, that here's the call. I am very much open to mentorship because maybe there's some women hunters out there who wouldn't mind taking me along with them, or to be a part of a hunt or to witness that. I'm an absorber right now at this stage of my life. This is I and in this arena, I want to absorb as much information and experience as I can. And I really see that there's some wonderful leaders out there, but it's really hard because, like I said, as a female, to just jump in with some dudes.
Yep.
Most men have their buddies that they go hunting with, or they go hunting with their families, or there's the awkward barrier of a man and a woman don't just like trek off together to go, intimately hunting for a week. So that's an interesting thing that I'm, as an adult woman entering hunting, that's kind of this big, when you weren't raised with this and you have there's no, map. It's going to be my unique challenge, I think.
Yeah, what's funny is I take my experience and only can magnify it to you being a female because everyone's like, "Dude, I don't want to take a random stranger with a firearm out into the woods."
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know this person. Can I trust
Right.
them? And like, you know,
Yeah.
yes. And then you add the female factor to it's like, me and my hunting partner Tony, we sleep in what looks like a one man tent, but
Yeah.
but we're so comfortable and familiar with each other that we just know how to sleep in it without it making it awkward. And yet that is not something that my wife would be comfortable with, or like
Or
there's these other boundaries that you have to navigate and uphold. And so I actually have somebody in mind, and I'm gonna speak it right now. Jana Waller from Skullbound TV. She is an absolute hero and legend in the hunting community, and I believe that you and her are gonna be best friends.
oh,
And
well,
I'm going to as soon as we get off this podcast, do an introduction text message for the
thank
three of us, and um, she speaks your language.
Wonderful that well, I put it out there for a reason because, I do believe that when you're stuck on something, the power of the ask and the power of putting it out there is important. And I feel very humbled for any opportunity I have to meet with people doing this great work. They are heroes to me.
Yeah,
So
I
thank you.
I love it. You're welcome. My pleasure. It's my honor to be able to connect that community because that's what it's all about. Jess, what words would you like to leave the listeners with? Whether it's words of encouragement or words of wisdom or just an experience, because you have your own events, you have your own things that you do with the Wild Kind Academy. But what's this takeaway?
Well, as I think, let's see here. Thank you for asking. I think that we live in a very unique time. And I've mentioned that before, but it's such a powerful time to be alive. Everything is moving quickly and everything is supercharged. And I think we all have this potential to kind of um, to really explore awakening in a way that we can all thrive, even though we're packed in here. Is lots of population growth going on. We live in cities. Everyone has a different experience. Some people are thriving in the cities, which is fabulous. But if anyone is feeling that sense of unease or exhaustion or just numbness, which I have experienced completely. I think most of us have experienced what it feels like to feel numb and to feel empty and to feel um, like something's missing. And I think we all have this opportunity to find for ourselves and lifestyle design in a way that we can start to come alive and change the script that this isn't about survival, this is about thrival. This is like this time in life we have all these tools available to us. There's so much information out there, but it's not just about information overload, it's about doing.
Yes.
Like like I would even say, get off the YouTube channels for a bit and actually just get out and go for it. Like, we have nothing to lose. This is Our lives are so precious. And
Yes.
I've worked at a funeral home. I've worked with the dead. I worked in cemetery sales many years ago. I took in what it was like to be around dead bodies. I know that sounds really morbid right now, but the point is like, when you get that close to death, and you realize how precious it is to be breathing and to
Mm,
be alive, there is no challenge we can't take on and overcome. And I really, truly believe that. I truly believe it's just a matter of changing the dial, making bold moves, lifestyle design, writing out what you want, and then absolutely going after it, because there is no other time to do it. This is it.
yeah.
This is our moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's oh man, it's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's this concept of destiny versus predestined that I think people lose hope. Hope disappears. It's a sailing ship, and it's like, okay, well, there it goes. And they live this life of, you always get what you always got because you always do what you've always done. And
Yeah.
they don't change anything up, or they don't evaluate where they're at and constantly take account of where they are and who they are, that the doldrums of life. Here we go. The Eeyore, another day. Want. It's like, no, dude, life is now. Life is
Mm,
happening for you, not to you. Get
mm,
jazzed. What do you want to do today? What do you want to accomplish today? Life is at your fingertips.
yeah.
It's just a
And,
choice.
it's like witness the magic of a sunrise, the simplest things. And then when you have that moment of surging in your body of that inspiration where you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm alive, I'm alive. You can feel it. There's like this moment where you see something, witness something, feel something. And those things you can take back to your life and your everyday life, your mundane life,
Yes.
and start to change the script for yourself. And I think, I mean, I've walked away from some big stuff. I've had major life fails where I had to start over, from the bottom,
Yeah.
from rock bottom, and those then you come out the other side and you're like, God, I'm so glad I just like let it all burn.
Yeah.
It's like because that's we're here to do it. This is our chance.
Totally. I'm going to just quickly, briefly, and we'll wrap this up. I want to share a story that happened to me just a couple weeks ago before school was out. And I teach eighth grade, and one of my eighth grade students every day comes to school with a hood on, just long hair in front of his eyes, so you can't actually. And he's wearing a mask, right? Because public
Mhm.
school, the mask. I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know what this kid looks like. He doesn't remove his hood, all this stuff, and
yeah.
every day, hey, how you doing? Tired. Oh, well, why are you tired? I don't know. No, yeah, you do. Why are you tired? And he's like, because I went to bed really late. I was like, well, why'd you go to bed so late? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, no, you do know. Why did you go to bed late? And he was like, because I was staying up playing video games or on my phone. I was like, okay, well, do you like being tired? And he was like, no. I was like, so do something about it and change it. And he just kind of stared at me. Well, what I thought was staring at me through his hair. You guys, listeners, you can't see him holding my fingers across my face right now, like super emo. Not that he was an emo student. He just had such long hair that it was covering his face and I couldn't see him. And he shows up like a week later. He has his hood off. His hair is combed and brushed and out of his eyes. And I look at him and I was like, you look phenomenal today. Your hair looks really good. And he just lit up. And I asked him, I go, what happened? What changed? He's like, well, I woke up earlier today. So I had time to do my hair. I was like, why'd you wake up early? He goes, because I went to bed earlier. And I was like, oh man, he really put these dots together. And I go, look at what happened. You, because you took care of yourself and you put the needs and priorities of your health first, you then allowed space for others to enjoy who you are and to also bring compliments to you that just lit you up. And as simple as that story
Mm,
is about a haircut and a decision, I feel like that is about life and hunting and taking care of us in the everyday world. If you just
mm,
change
yeah.
something, the ripple effect, you don't know the outcome of how grand it's going to be in your life. And that is where the transformation truly happens.
That's so beautiful. And I love stories, especially of our youth who have moments of self-appreciation and a sense of belonging to the point where they can lift their hoodie up. That's I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
Jess, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your stories. I can't wait. Well, we're gonna have to have you back on after you get your first kill, and we'll
Oh,
we'll
thank
talk
you.
all about that. For all the
Thank you.
listeners, yeah, my pleasure. For all the listeners, how can they find you? How can they connect with you? And you said you've put it out into the universe. If there's anyone that wants to mentor me, I'm open. So how can people reach out?
Yes, well, through I just launched the website, so it's just out there, wildkindacademy.com, and there is a contact me page, and through my email, which is just jess@wildkindacademy.com. And then I'm on Instagram. I love Instagram. That's where I'm doing my weekly rewilding posts and my weekly Path of the Hunter reflections post. That is Jess _Wildkind Academy. And I'm also, Wild Kind Academy has a Facebook page as well. So you can just find Wild Kind Academy on Facebook as well.
I love it. And I will make sure to have those in the show notes for all the listeners to go check out. Jess, thank you so much. Be blessed. You are, you can't outgive good. I talk about that
Mhm.
all the time on this podcast. And when you are putting good out into this world and doing what you're doing, you're going to be reaping the benefits beyond that anyone can even imagine. So thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, and I can't wait for what's to come.
Thank you, Johnny Mac. That goes straight into the solar plexus. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah. Woo.
Heck yeah. Woo.
Well,
Thank you.
yes, listeners, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you would be so kind, go give Jess a follow. Go let her know how much you enjoyed this podcast, this episode. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, freedom on and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.